What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Good to see you in the chat there, Male Nurses Rock. Made me chuckle as I was signing on, and the crowd chants, Terry, Terry. Love it. Love it. Appreciate it. Wasn't sure there was going to be a show today, just the way that this one was coming together. Took a while to get through projections for this sloppy, ugly, messy, disgusting slate, and I'm telling you right now, bunch of stuff's going to change between now and probably the end of this show, probably in the next 10 minutes after I've gotten these Sims run. But we've got a 9-game slate on DraftKings. We've got an 11-game slate on FanDuel. We've got a ton of guys out already. We've got a number of different question marks, several different question marks. Damn it. Chalk one onto the unnumber board. Several players that we know are probable, several players potentially making their debuts with their new team. A lot of stuff to sort through. Hope you guys like the Toronto Raptors, particularly their worst players overall, because they're just owned through the nose on both sites. We'll see that in a second. It's going to be a weird one. Looking around the industry, it does look like there are different takes on this slate right now in some spaces. Not entirely wildly different takes, but, some players here, some players there, particularly around some of the new situations, some of the injury situations, some of the situations where players might be held out a little bit. We've got weird situations like with the Nets, like Cam Johnson is just off the injury report. Not even questionable, not probable, just not on the injury report. I wasn't necessarily expecting him to throw back in the mix. I figure he's going to get traded by tomorrow. The reason for a lot of the chaos is the trade deadline tomorrow afternoon, which is going to be a total blast. How many games do we actually have tomorrow? Because that's going to be a total mess. Let's see. Today. All right, tomorrow we've only got 6 to deal with, and it's a 7:30 start, so that's a plus. But that'll be fun shaking that up. But there's a lot of moving parts that are impacted potentially tonight. So let's kind of dive in. Sims, as usual, run over to our pals at acemind.io. The website that the projections are on is rotoscouts.com. Everything is under $1 a day. A question came up at the very end of the show. I answered it in chat yesterday. But I think it was one of the Travises asked if NHL was included. And to ram the point home, everything, if it's on the website, it only costs you one subscription fee, regardless of sport. If I just randomly say, what's interesting? I'm going to try and project the Daytona 500. And I throw Daytona projections up there. Those are included in whatever you're already paying. Under $1 a day for access to whatever I put on that website. Full stop. Never going to change. At least not right now. No plans to change for many years. Let's put it that way. If we're at the point where there's thousands of members, we're paying employees, people are looking to purchase the site, never going to plan, wouldn't sell in that situation. Because these sites just go into the absolute garbage once they get sold. Particularly like content sites, comedy sites, and so on. It's just such a travesty when they get sold. But anyway, my point is, anything like that, way, way off in the future. We're not looking for much, and everything is included. So hopefully that makes the point for everybody. Taking a look at the Vegas game board. Let's go through these 11 ridiculous games that we've got on tap. Anthony Taylor's here. What's up, man? Good to see you. Handful of folks trickling in. A little bit later, I know I said I was going to try and get the show off earlier in the day today, and I am going to try and do that going forward. Hopefully it'll be a little bit smoother in the next few days after the deadline and into next week. But I'd love to kick these off in like the 3 o'clock hour, and that's where I like to do the baseball show. I think was a little bit earlier in the afternoon most days. So I'm going to angle back toward that in the coming days. This one just was difficult and long to project. So anyway, San Antonio at Atlanta. The debut of Aaron Fox is expected in this one. San Antonio 4.5-point favorites, 243-point total to get us started. Pretty juicy looking game there. Definitely can consider some of the Spurs options. I'm sure Trae will come up at least a little bit on the Hawks side. The Bucks at the Hornets, both Giannis and Dame are probable. Bobby Portis as well. We'll go through the ins and the outs. I don't need to try and remember them off the top of my head. Charlotte missing the usual pieces, plus Misic is questionable right now. The Bucks favored by 10.5, 222.5 point total. They overnight this morning traded Chris Middleton for Kyle Kuzma. Neither of those players are going to be active for their new teams. The Cavs at the Pistons, 235.5 point total. Cavs looking to get off the schneid after losing a bad one to the Celtics last night. Solid win for Boston. That game started out really good. Started out with just gritty, a lot of defense. It was like 7-5 after the first 5 minutes of the first quarter. And then the Celtics got up pretty big, started hitting their shots. Early on, they were just missing everything. But I think the Cavs definitely handle business here against Detroit. Detroit, not an awful option. I'm sure we'll see some pieces, the usual suspects anyway, floating up from that one. It's a decent enough total. I just don't love throwing teams into the grinder against that Cavs team. Memphis at Toronto. This is an ultra sloppy game. I already mentioned we're getting a ton of Toronto. We have a ton of guys questionable from Memphis. Don't really know what the minutes are going to look like for that team there. There's just a mishmash of minutes through the middle of those guys anyway. It's typically, the top two guys on the team and then but we might see some value emerge depending on the ins and the outs. Toronto, we've already got a bunch of value and we might be getting more. So definitely one to keep an eye on. 236.5 point total. Memphis favored by 10.5 in Toronto. Miami at Philly. Philly missing a bunch of pieces and parts. No Joel Embiid, no Paul George, etc., etc. Do expect the debut of Quentin Grimes in this one. So that'll be an interesting little wrinkle in that group of guys that get, mid-20s minutes, a little impact on the Ricky Councils of the world most likely. But we're kind of just guessing. I think I have him at 24 minutes if I remember correctly. So giving him a handful, I do think he's got the ability to run up to 28, 30 if they're looking to get a look at their new asset. So we'll see what happens with those, but we're kind of speculating a lot there. 220 point total in that game. Miami favored by 1 on the road. Miami without Jimmy Butler, usual setup there. Washington at Brooklyn, 217.5 point total, the low point on the entire slate. Ugly game. Washington again, no Kuzma. Jordan Poole maybe from their side, but just a terrible low total. All the different games just went away except for this one and the next one. Everything's getting updated over on Pinnacle. So the Nets actually favored at home in this game. And some weird activations and ins and outs for the Nets, but we could see that go away come game time. We could also see a trade before game time. Chicago at Minnesota. Minnesota favored by 11.5 at home, 226 point total there. Usual suspects, I would say. Well, no, there's some upside on the Minnesota side because they're going to get a little bit of pacey. Obviously, monster favorites. So I think the top end out of Minnesota for sure we'll at least take a look at. And then Chicago with Levine out of town. We saw Buzelis have a nice game yesterday. We talked about him. Had a lot of him through my projections. I think he's going to be on the board again, and then just the usual top end. But Chicago does have a bunch of guys that are on the trade block. Kobe White, Vooch, et cetera, et cetera. So we could see some shakeup on that side. Right now, they're looking at least very interesting and could get even more so. Next two games fell off the board. I'll go back to just what I had in the sheet earlier. Did I close that? When in the hell did I close that? Ready? It is. All right, hold on. Find the correct file. There we go. 2.7. That's going to be annoying. Did that not save the last update that I did? Bear with me one second. I'm just checking the... Yeah, going to have to redo that. That's annoying. All right. No major tragedy. Just the last update. As I was getting stuff ready for the show, I must have closed the model file without saving the last update. We're not far off, but I'll have to redo a couple things after the show. But that's fine. Going to have to redo plenty after the show anyway. All right, so going back to those last couple of games. Golden State at Utah, 224.5 point total last I saw it. Golden State favored by 6 on the road. No Mo Moody as of a little while ago. obviously kind of messy there. A lot of the potential trade conversations. They're trying to get KD to Golden State. KD came out this afternoon, said he doesn't want to play for Golden State. That was a weird trade setup anyway, because it would have involved bringing Jimmy Butler to Phoenix, sending KD out. But then why would they want Jimmy Butler? It's just weird. So it wasn't giving that rumor all that much credit anyway. Golden State at the top end, and then just the disgustingness of all those guys that get low 20s minutes. But you might see a little bit more of some of those guys, given that Moody's out. That gives us 24 minutes to spread across, or 22, whatever I had him at, to spread across those other guys. New Orleans at Denver. Denver looks fantastic today. 239-point total, very juicy one. Favored by 10.5 in a home game. Nikola Jokic should be able to do whatever he wants. Christian Brown's going to look pretty good as a mid-board value. MPJ's probably going to be up there. Jamal Murray's probably going to be up there a little bit. But Jokic right now, to me, looking like the jewel of the slate. We'll see how he came up in the Sims. And then the two FanDuel games, Phoenix OKC. KD is doubtful for this one. He's not playing. 13-point spread in OKC's favor in a home game. No surprise there. 229-point total. Some SGA. Jalen Williams is back for this one, so some Jalen is fine from that game. We'll see how they came through. I'm not expecting many surprises from that one. I doubt we get to the Lou Dorts of the world or anybody like that on such a big slate. And then rounding things out, Orlando at Sacramento. I think we're actually going to talk about that one a little bit on the FanDuel side, because there's a pretty big share of Paolo Banchero coming through that I can spy in the corner over here, just in the side of the sheet that's open. So he looks like the only real outlier player from that game for the late night. We're getting some Devin Booker, we're getting some Franz Wagner, but not to the extent that we're getting Paolo there. So that one might be one to talk about. Ins and outs. So as mentioned in the 4 o'clock hour, Mo Moody went out. That was updated. That is updated on the website. It is updated in what we're going to be looking at here, but for reasons that escape me, that last update didn't save in my projections. If you see something that is slightly different, like, oh, we had him at 26 minutes, but 25 and a half points, not 25 points. Forgive me. It's just a matter of, how much I might have tweaked somebody's rate, and I'm going to have to do it again to catch back up to where I was. But very negligible differences. Getting into the ins and the outs. Probable. Donovan Mitchell, Giannis, Dame, Bobby Portis. De'Aaron Fox is available to make his debut. Jordan McLaughlin is also available. Trae Young, Haywood Highsmith, Dunk Robinson. Nick Claxton's available. Draymond Green, Kevon Looney's available. Andrew Wiggins, Jalen Williams is available. The guys that I didn't say is available are the probables. Questionables: Brook Lopez, Vasily Micic, Chris Paul, Brandon Clark, John Conchar, Marcus Smart, Vince Williams Jr., there's all your Grizzlies, Chris Boucher, Eric Gordon, Quentin Grimes, Kyle Lowry, Daron Sharp, Dalen Terry, Lauri Markkanen, Aaron Gordon. Pretty interesting list of guys that are still questionable. And then a big, long list of outs and doubtfuls. Isaac Okoro, Dean Wade, Jaden Ivey, Chris Middleton, who got traded, LaMelo Ball, Trey Mann, Cody Martin, Brendan Miller, Josh Okogie, Grant Williams, all the usual suspects for the Hornets are still out. Charles Bassey, Bogdanovich, Kobe Buffkin, Clint Capella, Jalen Johnson, all the Hawks are still out. Daquan Plowden is in the G League still. Cody Zeller, Desmond Bane is out. Cam Spencer's out. RJ Barrett and Jakob Poeltl and Emmanuel Quickley are all out for Toronto. That's creating a lot of that Toronto value. Jimmy Butler, Josh Richardson, Drew Smith all out. Andre Drummond's doubtful. Joel Embiid is out. Paul George is doubtful. KJ Martin got traded. Jared McCain, there's your Philly value. Marvin Bagley, Patrick Baldwin, Sadiq Bey, Kyle Kuzma got traded. Alex Sarr, all those guys are out for Washington. Bojan Bogdanovic, Noah Clowney, Maxwell Lewis, DeAnthony Melton, Cam Thomas, Trendon Watford, Dariq Whitehead. All those guys are out for Brooklyn, but as mentioned, no Cam Johnson listed on that list, which is just sudden and surprising ahead of the trade deadline. Lonzo Ball, Zach Collins, Taylor Horton, Tucker, Kevin Huerter, Trey Jones, Adama Sanogo, Dante DiVincenzo, Julius Randle, Jonathan Kuminga, Mo Moody, Taylor Hendricks, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Colin Sexton, Asher Shibwe, who's also in the G League, PJ Tucker, Cody Williams, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray. This is getting ridiculous. Daniel Tice got traded today. Vlaco Konkar, Peyton Watson, Russ Westbrook, Kevin Durant, AJ Mitchell, Cason Wallace, Jalen Suggs is doubtful, and Mo Wagner is out. So that's fun. And we're going to get more news. There's more coming. We're probably going to get some trades. Ooh. Sounds pretty good, Doug. Doug made 10 FanDuel lineups yesterday. Got a lineup into 64th. I had five or six. I forget. I just threw a handful in, which is what I've been doing lately. And I had one in the 300 range. I want to say it finished. Maybe 600 range. I forget which. But it was a contender for most of the night. Most of the night, the handful of lineups that I made were right there. Who burnt me yesterday? Lonzo. Lonzo killed me. Better game out of Lonzo, and I have a better day. But it was still a minor, tiny profit. Yeah, Mama, that's how it felt. Mama says, Jesus Christ, turn on the show, and it sounds like you're naming everybody in the NBA. Yeah, the list today is absurd. At least it's a lot of known knowns for that part, right? It's not a ton of questionables today. Where we're going to run into some walls, I think, is around some surprise scratches, some potential trades, stuff like that. But hopefully they take a couple hours off and don't make the trade still after the slate. Let's get into this one. Differentiated slate. So as usual, we will sort by DraftKings, but cut by FanDuel positioning as usual with the larger slates. But again, really, these three guys, Devin Booker, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, kind of straightforward and obvious out of those late games. We didn't come away with any Jalen. We really didn't come away with much SGA. Little bit of Sabonis. Any one of those three guys, if you have some shares, if you have a handful of shares, totally fine. And honestly, there is enough upside in SGA on any given slate where if you wanted to build a little position, it's incredibly anti-optimize or anti-sim because of his cost, but we know what the ceiling looks like. The thing is, we've got a ton of value and a lot to work with and many other ceiling type guys on this slate, and he still didn't really come up at that price. So I wouldn't really force it, but more than this is fine. The other guys down the board here, and we'll circle back when we do positionally, but Malik Monk, Hartenstein, mix and match types. Zach LaVine, I wouldn't mind having more of that because he feels pretty cheap at 75. It's not really coming through in the value. I think it's like cheap relative to ceiling more than cheap relative to median projection. But I do think there's more meat on the bone for LaVine in his debut there. It's a good defensive team on the other side. But 1.09 per minute for 7,500 feels pretty good. I wouldn't mind having a little more of that. Bradley Beal mix and match play. Nobody else is standing out at all. Again, we'll go through those when we hit the positions. Jump to guards. We will, apologies if we miss anybody. We'll try and catch everybody in the mix. Let's actually see. Hold on. Because there are some guys with like weird guard forward positioning lately between these two sites. Looks like we're, at least among the most critical guys, we're pretty common. Zaire Williams will come off the board in this conversation because he's small forward on FanDuel, shooting guard, small forward on DraftKings. So we'll catch him when we talk about forwards, and we'll go through it. Grady Dick will be on the board because he'll be a guard on both. All right, I think we're okay. Just want to make sure there's nobody critical on such a big slate. All right, so again, Devin Booker, the one real outlier guard on that FanDuel slate. With no KD there, looking pretty solid. There's also no more Nurk there. He's going to be able to do whatever he wants. He's at 28.6% usage on average, 28.9 last year. 1.15, you could argue that that's a little bit disappointing. He's lost almost a tenth of a fantasy point on essentially the same usage, but without those guys there taking up additional usage, there's more opportunity for him to do more. So don't mind some Booker. I could see building a little bit of a spot there and maintaining some late flexibility, but then you're going to want to have two of those guys, and there's nobody else really popping amongst the guards. So maybe that's how you get into your forward shares. You'll have Booker and Banchero. That gives you some expensive flexibility. But then that's going to put you into a certain tier where, say something happens and all of a sudden a key value guy emerges there and you need to put him in one of those spots. Now you got to see what you can buy your way to. Maybe that buys you your way from Book to SGA. Maybe that's a way that ends up emerging and being valuable late at the end of the night. But it almost becomes a situation where now you're talking about wanting three spots because two of the guys that we'll have in abundance are going to be expensive guys. So you'll want that third spot to be able to drop a value guy into, drop a mid-range or two mid-range and a pay-up. So it's interesting for those late games as far as just who's going to land in your lineups if you're looking to talk about it for flexibility. All right. Jacoby Walter, come on down. 28 minutes for 3,900, shooting guard only on FanDuel. Gives him a 6.2 value score when we're looking for 5. That got him into 66% of our lineups. He's one of the most highly projected owned players by the field on FanDuel. Same thing on DraftKings, where he costs 3,200. He's also got eligibility at shooting guard and small forward, so you get the MPE over there. Almost 85% of our top 150 lineups. He's a 7.4 value on DraftKings when we're looking for 5.5. Just looks very, very strong. He is a 0.75 per minute guy. There's some fragility of minutes there, but we saw him play 29-1 in a start the other day. He gave us exactly 18.2 FanDuel points. That's short of the mark, even for his low expectations as a low per minute type. He's got an 18% usage rate, right around league average, so there's reason to expect that he'll perform better than he did in that one. You don't have to hesitate on pulling the trigger for the value play just because it didn't really work out the last time. If he doesn't get into that starting lineup, then there's a little bit of a question. If we have reason to believe that he's not going 28, then there's a little bit of a question. But right now, I think it looks pretty decent. Jordan Poole, as mentioned, no more Kuzma there, no Sar, so presumably going to be out there doing whatever he wants, which is doing Jordan Poole things. 1.09 for the season on 27.4% usage. Presumably we'll see him over 30% usage for today. Decent upside. Not a bad spot at all going up against a garbage Brooklyn team. The one thing for this, I think this pays down for... Yeah, pace down on the Washington side, but with those guys out, it really shouldn't matter. And again, Brooklyn is just not good. Not that Washington is. Washington's the worst team in the league. But this might be one of those rare instances where I'm kind of advocating for Jordan Poole. The minutes have been pretty decent. Got him at 34 for only 7,000 multi-position on FanDuel. 56% exposed in our top 150 and way, way above the field there. 65 on DraftKings, even cheaper. Point guard only over there kind of sucks, but that still got him in 76% of our lineups. He's got a 6+ value score on the FanDuel slate. Mamba says, can't wait to watch Kyrie without Luka. Now he finally gets a chance to win a chip. Free Kyrie. He had a better chance to win a chip when Luka was on the team, buddy. Jovel did get traded? Well, that's a wrinkle. What was the trade? He was on the block. That was he was initially apparently part of the conversations for the Middleton trade, the Middleton Kuzma trade that got executed, but doesn't look like that happened. So he goes to the Kings. Interesting. Wizards get City Cisco, the Cisco kid, Sissoko, however the hell you say that. And 2 second-rounders. That is not a lot. Not that Jovel's like a crazy asset, but as a 22, 24-minute-a-night big man, he can obviously still produce. Pretty decent pickup for the Kings. Steiny says the Warriors have shifted their focus to Jimmy Butler after abandoning their pursuit of KD now. These are Thursday news. All right, so that's going to have an impact on the slate. There's one. I told you this was going to change. I was hoping we get through more show before that. So Richaun Holmes Day. They've also got, it's going to be Holmes and or Vukovic. Tristan Vukovic. Sar's out. Bagley's out. I already had both of those guys getting minutes. I think it's just going to be an uptick for both of those guys, and those are Vukovic is a $3,000 center only on DraftKings. Richaun Holmes is a $3,400 center only on DraftKings, 35 and 39 respectively on FanDuel. So min-price center on both sites in Vukovic if he picks up some run here. Value that we really honestly didn't need. It's just one of those things that reconfigures the slate, or it makes it one of those slates where you can build basically anything and there's no one like key path. I talk about like the path through the woods all the time, like the optimal path through the woods. It gives you multiple potential paths to success in if you get just so much value, so many min price guys. It's going to be interesting. So this is where we were. Vukovic in 9 games, 4.5 minutes a game. Not exactly a killer sample, has put up 0.99. We do have some history with Richaun Holmes, obviously. He's a 1+ per minute fantasy player. This year, 1.0 on the nose FanDuel, 0.97 on DraftKings in his 12 games, 11.5 minutes a night. But 0.94 last year on mixed usage in a backup role last year. We've seen Richaun Holmes do Richaun Holmes things in a backup role before. At 18 minutes, he was not at all relevant to the slate, but if we're giving him 10 more, could definitely get involved a little bit here. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. I think those are the only two true bigs they're going to have available, though, right? All right, Mama. We're going to do this real quick. The Vegas odds. The place that knows everything and sets the standards for who has a chance at what, went down after that trade. There's no leg to stand on. The odds went down. You could like the trade more than others do. I think if you were here yesterday, I was ranting and raving about how much people are disrespecting AD. I was saying that AD is currently a top 10 player and a top 5 big man in the league. For this year, I don't think it's a terrible move. I think they'll still be a competitive basketball team, but their chances to win the title this year inarguably went down. There's no debate about that. You could disagree with Vegas all you want, but you'll be wrong. That's just the math of it. The odds went down. Amazing how people forget who the actual best player on that team. Are you saying that Kyrie is better than Luka? That's craziness if that's what you're saying in that second. Amazing how people forget who the actual best player on that team was. AD 10,000% better to win a chip. Luka took that team to the finals last year. Was AD's Lakers team with LeBron in the finals last year and I missed it? That's a wild take. Luka's the first or second best player in the league. I think he's 2 by DPM. So, yeah. I think AD has gotten wild disrespect all over the place. I was mentioning it yesterday. People were comparing him to a baseball trade for, like Juan Soto for Anthony Rendon. And I said yesterday, Anthony Rendon hasn't hit more than 6 home runs in the last 4 years, hasn't had more than 249 plate appearances. He truly does not play and sucks when he does. AD, again, to ram the point home, top 10 player in the league right now. Top 5 big man in the league right now. Kyrie is not better than Luka. That's madness. That's absolutely crazy. In no universe is Kyrie better than Luka Doncic at basketball. I don't normally make big blanket statements like that, and I like the debate, and I usually give a little bit more ground than that in these conversations. But come on, man. There's no universe in which Kyrie Irving is better than Luka Doncic. None. All the folks who believe the Mavs got better should be running to the betting window then. Sounds like Mamba did. And look, Mamba cashes tickets, man. Mamba cashes a lot of tickets. So you guys might want to follow him. Mamba just trolling as usual. Could be, Doug. Could be. You can get away with those kind of trolls here. You get banned for those kind of trolls at other places. I think Mamba believes it, though. I don't know if he believes me if he believes that Kyrie is better than Luka. In his heart of hearts, does Mamba really believe that? I don't know. I think you'd be out on a very small island, though, if that was your take. Floating around on a small island on the flat earth with you and Kyrie. the two people in the universe who think Kyrie's better than Luka. I think he was banned from Osimo. Poor guy. See, that's shitty. I like Mamba. I enjoy Mamba. I'm always happy to see him. Mamba stirs the pot here, and he's a big winner for one thing. Always cashing tickets. Has screenshots to back it up. Respectfully disagree, but this is why I'm the expert. So, yeah, look, we have an open dialogue, and you are welcome to disagree. That is not a problem with me. Any take on the big men for getting back on track here? Any take on the big men for Washington here, guys? Is there anybody like I'm not really thinking of that's going to play these minutes? I was pulling up the roster when I got derailed there. I just want to look at everybody's. God damn, Holmes is only 6'9". I thought he was taller than that. So Anthony Gill's got a little size. He could pick up a couple additional minutes. And then, yeah, I mean, it's probably Holmes over Vukovic. But Vukovic has more size. He's 6'10". Rashawn obviously has more experience. Vukovic is skinnier. 6'10", 220. That is a skinny dude versus 6'9", 235 for Rashawn. God damn, they're still paying Rashawn Holmes $12 million. Could also just go small. It's not exactly a ton of size on the other. Well, Claxton's going to be healthy. Yeah, I don't know. This is going to be one to definitely watch where the minutes fall. Whoever starts between these two is probably going to pick up at least some value. Most particularly, I think, if it is Vukovic, because he's cheaper. He's dead min on both sides. I don't know that they get into a crazy amount of lineups, just given all the value that we've got. And, like, do I want to block out shares of Wemby, who's got power forward and center on FanDuel, fortunately, and center only, so you can play him side by side with a value big. But that blocks off getting to those Jokic shares. I can't get Jokic side by side with Wemby if I use one of those value centers. On DraftKings, you can't. You can't do it on either site, because those guys are only centers if they become values at all. So right now you can get both those guys, assuming there's enough value, and I haven't priced it out, but got to be close at least. And it looks like that's definitely coming up on DraftKings because you've got the util spot to work with. But if you're going center util there, you can't get that third center, obviously. Power forward eligibility for Wemby on DraftKings would have been clutch. Good boy. You excited about the Joe Val trade? Go lie down. All right. Getting back on track. Dive back into our guards conversation. We were like 3 guys into this. Yeah, we were on Jordan Poole appropriately. Again, everything Denver in this one, I think looks great. Jamal Murray, 22%. We're below the field. I'll take a little bit more. He's right at our value mark on the nose. But that's going to be one that's going to be dictated a little bit by what goes through point guard, shooting guard for some value plays, for some mid-board type plays. 83 puts him a little bit on a higher shelf than some of the capable mid-type guys in the 6s and the 7s, but definitely an appreciable chunk there. And 43% dead even with the field, 5.6 value, nicely above our 5.5. 7,700 is a great price. He's got multi-guard eligibility. Love the Jamal Murray play here. Christian Brown, again, playing plenty of minutes. 32.6 on average for this season. I've got him at 35 today because we've seen an uptick recently. Played 41 the other day. I think that was an overtime game, if I'm remembering correctly. 5,500 on DraftKings just looks great for the money. 5.61 value score. He's a 0.82 per minute player, but there's upside for New Orleans just inherently for Denver rather, inherently in this game. And he situationally looks great, and the price really hasn't caught up with the production or the minutes. 5.5 value on FanDuel, 47%. That's slightly below the field. Field is very heavy on some of these guys, but that's a nice position to have, and you're getting him in nearly 50%, so you really don't need to push the issue and get to the field. Kelly Oubre, different play across sites. FanDuel's got him priced up a little bit for the current minutes, the current production with everybody out. 7,400 on the FanDuel slate. We got him just 2% of the time below the field. If you want more, go ahead and take more. I mean, he's an okay mid-range type guy. It's just you'd be pushing him back up to like 8% and level with the field. To get ahead of the field, you would have to go from a respectable negative position here to a fairly respectable positive position, and you'd probably end up like 16, 18, 20%. And that just feels wrong. So I'd rather have him here. But there's definitely opportunity there. That said, not the best game environment, Philly against Miami. And also, again, the minutes have gotten a little uptick. The production has as well. But for the season, overall, we're talking about a guy who's played at 0.85 this year, 0.92 last year. Yes, it's been better lately, but could dip. 6,800 on DraftKings, different story. We got him 18% of the time at the better price. Again, below the field and wouldn't chase it back up the ladder. I don't think you want 25. I don't think you want 30. Right there at 18 and below the field, or even a little further down, 15-ish, somewhere in that territory. Grady Dick, one of the Toronto guys coming through, more so on FanDuel, where we're level with the field and way above our 5 value threshold. 4,600 shooting guard and small forward eligible. Whoops. That wasn't the overkey. Looks like a strong asset on the FanDuel slate. Played 30 minutes last night. Disappointed with just 23.1 FanDuel points. But for the season, he's played at 0.81. Again, there's no Quickly. There's no RJ. There's definitely holes. So I like the upside for Dick here. 6.18 value didn't really get him there on DraftKings, kind of shockingly. For one, we've got that ridiculous Jacoby Walter coming out of the same group for 1,000 less, so he's probably just occupying a lot of those shares. If you give up some Jacoby Walters, it's totally reasonable to just plunk Grady Dick into that same spot, and if you level him with the field in the 20s, I think that's fine. Get him around the exposure that we got to him on FanDuel, I think you're all right, 24, 25%. Yeah, Brian mentions it in the chat. That's a really good call out. The Quentin Grimes deal. I agree. I don't know that it makes just as little sense as dealing a 25-year-old superstar, Luka. But yeah, I don't really understand why they traded Quentin Grimes for what's his face. Quentin Grimes is a solid young 3-and-D wing. He's not great, but he's definitely a good role player. I liked him when he was picked. I liked him when he was on the Knicks. I was kind of like, when he left. But yeah, that surprised me. For Caleb Martin? Like, what was the appeal? I don't really get it. I your second comment there too, Brian. I saw those comments. That was unfortunate, poorly thought out comments by who was that? Schroeder? Who was that? I don't want to pin it on Schroeder because I forget who it was. But whoever that was saying that, really didn't think it through. Yes, it's unfortunate that part of the contracts that they signed that he referred to in those comments that pay them millions of dollars do allow for freedom of movement and trades, but it also allows for the lucrative free agency in which they participate. So, like, some good, some bad. But yeah, using the analogy that he did, absolute madness. Stupid. Nuke says, just don't think anyone is better than me. Mom, I don't need to troll when you're just right about everything you say, Doug. Mom is banned from Awesemo for telling them they were wrong when I took Scotty Barnes for Rookie of the Year, and I told everybody to take him at 80-1. Woo! Yeah, a little quick with the ban button over there. I had those privileges, and I used them every now and then. And for me to ban you, and I've literally never kicked anybody from our little community here because why would I? There's nobody difficult. But the only time I ever did it was if somebody was being like racist or like, obviously like you can't say that shit. Otherwise, like, say whatever you want. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm an idiot. Huh? Like I said, I like hearing other opposing points. because it helps me reinforce the argument. It opens my eyes to other things. As I've said all along, this is a dialogue. I'm not here saying I'm right. I know everything. I know what I'm talking about. I almost misspoke. I'm not here saying I'm right. I'm the king. You guys just got to listen to me. Let's talk. That's what these shows always are. Anyway, continuing on down this board that we've made no progress on. A lot of big distributions right here on the FanDuel side. A lot of Trey coming up in that game against San Antonio. I don't mind that for only 9,200, 1.22. On DraftKings, he came up a lot less. He's 400 more expensive, point guard only on both sites. Just a little bit lower value, but you could definitely take some Trey. I think this is the appropriate position to be relative to the field on Trey. And right here, if you goose that a little bit, you'd be talking about putting him in half your lineups, but you could potentially build a little position. We're probably a little out ahead of the field there. Ant at 48.67, same distribution. It's technically a little behind the field. 9,400 for him. I do not mind at all pairing these two players in a lot of FanDuel lineups, and it looks like they're basically in half. I can't imagine that it's exactly half with one and half with the other, so we probably got some commingling of those two guys with the distributions that we already saw, of Wemby that we're getting to, of Jokic that we're getting to. This is a stars and scrubs slate, I'm telling you that right now. Less of Ant on the DraftKings slate for 9,800, point guard and shooting guard eligible, shooting guard small forward on the FanDuel board, 12%. Less than the field. Again, he's 400 more expensive. Same price difference as Trae Young seeing. So that's accounting for a lot of that difference. Ant and Trey both fall into the bucket of if you want more of that guy, go ahead and take more. They are good enough to fulfill that role. Ant against Chicago especially could be a standout. I mean, that Chicago team has been giving up a ton of pace all season long. That team has given up a ton of scoring all season long. They're shorthanded. Some of their best players are gone. That also could mean, though, that this Minnesota team just goes out there, handles their business completely, waxes them, and Ant only ends up playing 33 minutes instead of his usual 36 and falls short. So a little bit of fragility there in a very, very good-looking play for a superstar. Koulibaly probably going to change a little bit. I got to see what it looks like with no Joval, so we'll probably, at worst, I think we'll see a rate uptick here, and he might move from 34 to 35, 36 minutes, depending on how I'm throwing those around. Steph, 5%, 10% across sites, mix and match play. Major upside for guards against Utah. I'll give him that much. He's played at 1.22 this season, 1.28 on the DraftKings board. Got him a little ahead of that, and still we didn't really get there. We're behind the field. I feel like we're just letting the field have a little bit of Steph without us necessarily getting there. But I think that's probably about right. I don't know that I would really go chasing it back up the board. A few more shares is fine. A few more shares over here is fine. But not one to really load up on. Maxey kind of falls into the same category at a higher price. Definitely capable of stacking up points, but not the greatest game environment against Miami. Not the best price. He's 1,600 more than Steph on FanDuel, 1,700 more than Steph on DraftKings. So these guys are just kind of falling off the boat a little bit here. Now, Maxey did put up a 60 in FanDuel scoring in 40.5 minutes the other day. Capable of going right back to that kind of production. I've got him projected for 38 minutes, so 40's in the cards. His range is 36 to 42. Trey coming off a monster 58 FanDuel point performance in nearly 38 minutes in his last game. The most appealing piece of the New Orleans side. Not really coming up as a critical value like we've seen. The price has just kind of caught up with him being good and kind of their most relevant producer so far this season. 2.6% for 8,200, both guard and forward spot on FanDuel. 81, we got him a little bit more on DraftKings for the slightly cheaper price. But you can see how far off the value is. We're looking for 5.5 there. At 5.44, we only got a few shares of Jordan Clarkson for 56. That's just how much is going through the position. I do think that puts Clarkson on the board for, conversation around, like, if you're swapping out $5,500 Christian Brown in some lineups, $5,600 Jordan Clarkson at 6% in our top 150 and only slightly below the field, so call it 10-12% public ownership. That's when you could take back to the field with some of those spare shares if you're taking them out of Christian Brown, but Brown looks like the better play. Hey, how about that Jared Allen call yesterday? Not call, but like conversation that we had. None of these are calls. I hate that term. But that little corner of those four guys that we put side by side, with Allen being the lowest owned in the single digits, that came through nicely. Hopefully somebody got to that. I had a few shares on FanDuel. It was more a DraftKings thing, but worked out. Hey, I don't want to make this the anti-Awesemo show. It's not what we're looking to do. Lying about something you said and blocking you in the chat kind of sucks, definitely. I don't know that dude. I don't think. Was Bellman there when I was there? I don't think he was. Did I ever do a show with him? I forget. Anyway, the guys that I worked with, the guys that I know that are still there, everybody was always a good dude to me, and no issues with it outside of, as I mentioned before, the president of the company, who is not Alex Awesemo Baker, who was always a great dude and I always liked. But yeah, the only issue I had was all the way at the top of the ladder. I don't know if those are reciprocal feelings. Maybe people hate me, but I got no dislike. Thanks, Cooch. Sounds like that one worked out for Cujo. Sounds like Mama got to the island one. Good. Good. Like I said yesterday, I mean, that's just, those are the little pockets of this that make it interesting to me, of just like, ooh, look at this little corner. I got some stuff lined up for baseball on the StatCast boards for that. Little groups, little pockets of hitters. Like, did you know that these 5 guys swing the bat the same way as Shohei Ohtani does? Mike Conley coming up a little bit as a differentiated option down the board, 24% on FanDuel. I have him at 28 minutes. Played 26-6 in the last game. I might kick that down a minute so that we don't get overexposed to Conley. It is a good spot against Chicago. I don't totally love that. I'm going to give that one some thought. That's coming up a little bit more than I might have wanted. The public does look like they're there, though. We're technically below the field at that 24. Let me flag that. I'm going to give that a look. It's the only real big outlier going down. A couple shares of CJ. No De'Aaron Fox. No De'Aaron Fox on DraftKings at 8,000 either. That's a surprise. I'm surprised not to see him here, but not as. This at 8,000, I'm kind of very surprised by. I guess it doesn't math out, though. 4.78 on the value. That was a better value in my head when I was putting it together when I saw the price than what it actually maths out to. I think you can definitely take some shares of Fox. You can definitely take some shares of Jot. You can definitely take some shares of Donovan Mitchell, assuming he's out there and healthy. I do have the Cavs. Everybody, with that minute that I gave them in a competitive game yesterday, I took it back away from most of these Cavs. But Mitchell, assuming he's out there, perfectly fine to go to. McCollum, Fox, D'Lo, Io could definitely see some upside. Not really coming through right now, but as things change, could definitely see more of Io. Misic not coming through, might not play. KJ Simpson picking up a little bit at 4,000, and if Misic doesn't go, there could be more upside there for him. Right now, I've got him at 24 minutes for 4,000. That's already approaching a 5.5 value, 5.3 on FanDuel. We got him 11%, but below the field. At 4,200 on DraftKings, he didn't come up at all. Just a value to keep in mind again if we get no Misic. Jump some of these forwards, and I'll put the centers on the board too. Holmes and Kellyo are going to be so chalky today, says Power. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, Kellyo, monster shares. He's down here. But as mentioned, 85% DraftKings right now for 33, 80% FanDuel for 4,000. He's got power forward eligibility, which is great on the FanDuel slate. It eliminates that discussion we were just having where you can get Kellyo, Wemby, Jokic all in the same lineup if it works out, if you want to. So definitely valuable to have him with the power forward eligibility. This is with him at just 24 minutes. I think there's reason to believe that that's what he sees today, with the possibility of that being 26, maybe 28. I don't think we get to the upper 20s. That's why I've got him at 24. There's also probably a little bit of downside down to 22-20. I don't think we're getting less than 20. So at worst, I think you're getting, maybe a half of what's projected. Not a half, 3/4 of what's projected here. And that's taking, 4 minutes away. It's not even 3. It's more than 3/4. So I think you're fairly safe considering him a somewhat rock solid value. 6.67 value score on the FanDuel slate. 8.26 value score on DraftKings, one of the highest marks we've seen all year. Coming up right behind him, Matas Buzelis, who again came through pretty nicely, 31.4 points in 31 minutes last night on the FanDuel scale, right at a point per minute. 4,200, both forward spots on FanDuel. 4,000 power forward only, still gets him in a ton of lineups on DraftKings at 63%. Hard above the field on DK, more above the field on FanDuel at our 86% exposure. Doug saying Buzz has a chance to outplay Kelly O. Yeah, I can say it. They're projected. I mean, he's actually projected to on FanDuel. Other way around on DK. You also do have the wrinkle of Jonathan Mobo, who I don't think is going to come up for shares, but could get more minutes than I gave him. I have him at 20. Where is he? Yeah, at a 20-minute projection, he didn't come up, which is somewhat wild and reflective of how this value is going through this position on DraftKings. His value score is at 6.03, and we did not get a single share of him in that sim. That's wild. 5.71 value on $3,400 Carlo Makovic. Didn't get him. This is why I'm not entirely sure that Holmes Vukovic matters all that much. Look at all these cheapo guys with good value scores, most particularly this one at the min, that we just didn't get. Kind of wild. But there's a chance Mobo plays 24 minutes tonight. He played 23 last night. Picked up a lot of it after Pirtle went out. Obviously, it wasn't the plan for him to play those. Going into this one with a plan, does he see those minutes? I don't know. Could be less, could be more. That's why I kind of landed him. I middled it. I think he might play 14-16. I think he might play 24-26. Yeah, Grady is on the board for sure. We talked about him in the guards breakdown. I think he's on the forward. Yeah, he's right here. You can absolutely take more again. That's another guy. 6.18 value. He's shooting guard only on DraftKings at 42. Shooting guard and small forward on the FanDuel board. We're getting him at a 5.44 value, level with the field on FanDuel. But as I said before, I think you could level this out and make it look like this. 24, 25%, and even with the field. Not a bad move on Grady Dick. There should be enough upside there. Wemby, 31% FanDuel with power forward and center eligibility. 48% DraftKings, 10,800 over there. That's a lot cheaper than he is on FanDuel. He's 11.9 on the FanDuel slate. This is a really interesting comparison right there. And these are guys I put side by side quite often, Giannis and Wemby. There's a $1,000 price difference on DraftKings today. Giannis has performed at a 1.67 per minute DK this season. Wemby just at 1.62. That was higher last year. And this is the third best rate on the entire slate and in the league, I'm pretty sure. I don't know that that's worth $1,000 price difference. Could Wemby maybe take a haircut in his normal production now that De'Aaron Fox is going to be there? I wouldn't expect it, but it's possible that he sees a little bit less as far as like shot attempts, but maybe there's an uptick in rebound attempts when De'Aaron Fox is missing. There's a back and forth to that. And it all probably just comes out in the wash and he continues producing at this ridiculous level. But point being, I don't know that that's $1,000 price difference or worth $1,000 price difference. And more importantly, the Sims agree with that. So cheaper Wemby for sure, but that will put Giannis for 1,000 more into a unique little pocket of very low ownership among the stars. Jokic at 12.8, it was level with the field at our 36. Wemby level with the field, or a little above the field in the nearly 50% range. That means our 2% and hard undercut to the field on Giannis puts Giannis in the 8 to 12% range as far as public ownership goes. Easy enough to build a little position on Giannis. It's probably more a pivot off of more expensive Jokic, honestly. If you're taking these shares, then you go down by 1,000, put Giannis in there, and get Giannis side by side with Wemby, which isn't a terrible combination either. There's a lot of angles to play this. So, the ultimate point is, while I don't necessarily believe that Giannis should be a full 1,000 more expensive than Wemby, in the situation where we're finding him at lower public ownership by a significant margin to those guys, he makes for a really interesting pivot. On FanDuel, that's a little bit lessened. Wemby power forward center for 11.9 versus Giannis at power forward only for 12.1. And then Jokic at 13K center only. It's just a little bit more difficult to move those pieces around. But I do think since this 0.67 share that we got on Giannis is somewhat close to the field, that situation does exist where just the in a vacuum ownership, taking all other DFS aspects of it away, in a vacuum, if I can grab Giannis against Charlotte too, with nobody else there, that's at least an angle into this slate with one of the best players on the planet. So, reasonable argument to be made to throw a few additional Giannis shares in and just artificially get above the field because I'm not going to be there. I don't mind that. Mixing and matching our way down the board. We got no Nas on the FanDuel slate. 7,000. He's priced up a little bit over there at 63 on DraftKings, though. Still looking like a really nice piece. 20%, a little bit below the field. Power forward and center eligibility. Very solid per minute performer. Love the upside for Nas. You know, as long as we're getting this 30 minutes a night that he's been playing, 30 plus minutes a night with Randall out, even with the increased pricing, you can get some Nas here. I think he's being boxed out more by what else is going through that position and some popularity, and then the price is like the third factor that's hitting him there. But I think he's at worst playable on FanDuel. Don't take these to mean that you can't play him. Oubre we talked about. Aaron Gordon for just 5,400 typically would stand out to me. He's a 5.14 value. That's well above our threshold. We got him 2% of the time. That's another one, though, where that public ownership is going to be light. So if you throw a few more shares of Aaron Gordon in your pocket against a weak New Orleans team, that's never going to be bad. He's 4,900 on DraftKings. Holy shit. That is really cheap to find Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon is a really good player. I've mentioned it every time we've talked about him this season. He's underrated passer for a big man. He's a decent rebounder. This year so far, the rebounding numbers aren't great. 8.9% rebounding rate, 12.2% assists, 63.1% true shooting. But he's always been a very good fantasy performer. 0.94 per minute last year. Nothing not to like about the Aaron Gordon play on either side. He's above the value threshold on both. We got more of them here. We're below the field here. I would take about that share, 18, 20%. But on FanDuel, I do think the situation exists where you could say, all right, let me take this up to 10%. Leave the field behind at their 5%, build a different position there. I think that's viable. It's not mandatory. It's not something I'm saying you have to go do. But that does exist as a little cave you can duck into out on the battlefield. Stretching for an analogy there. Of course, Nuke. Absolutely. MLB is like the specialty, if I had to say, between the sports. Yeah, MLB is we're here big time for MLB. Can't wait. The site is rotoscouts.com for those that don't know. Projections under $1 a day for access to all of it. If it's on the site, it's yours for under $1 a day. No per sport nonsense, no back and forth, no surprise upticks. Brolo playing. Love it. One less thing. Donovan Mitchell, now questionable. I think he was questionable, wasn't he? Or was he probable? He was probable. All right, so that's actually noteworthy. That's a downgrade for Mitchell. He got banged up in that game last night. So I was surprised that he was probable. So, all right, we might open up some value on Cleveland. That's one to watch. Oh, I forgot we're cut by FanDuel. I was like, I know I checked that. Yeah, so not that he was coming up like much at all. But if he goes off the board, for one, we've got 32 minutes to redistribute to these guys. So you're just going to get natural upticks. Probably more interesting for that on DraftKings because FanDuel's got Ty Jerome and Karis LeVert at 54, 55. So trickle down minutes for those guys, I don't know that are going to matter. At 48 and 4,000, there's probably going to be more impact there on DK. The guy that I'd just out of the gate be most interested in would be Darius Garland. I think he would see a nice little uptick rate-wise, and then you'd get some rate into Mobley and into Allen and the starters, and then some trickle-down minutes for like Sam Merrill and so on and so forth. But the most interesting guys, I think, are going to be those value guys on DK, and then Darius Garland across the board if Mitchell doesn't go. Did you guys see Mitchell throw that down over KP last night, by the way? That was sick. I dropped it in the Discord. I don't think so, Power. I put that board together at like 4:30, and I had it as or like 4, and I had him in there as probable. That was off the 3:30 injury. No. 3:30 he was questionable. You're right. My bad. I must have been on the 2:30. Nope, 2:30 he was questionable as well. I just documented that incorrectly. Good call. So less surprising news there, but still questionable. So we still have no idea whether any of that's going to come to fruition. But yes, Power's correct. Mamba hit a Barkley 3 touchdown prop against Washington. I love Saquon, man. Dude is so good. Can't believe he's going to win a Super Bowl without us. I'm happy for him, though. I've decided, I think I talked about it, I've decided I'm rooting for the Eagles. Even as a Giants fan, I just want to see Saquon win. There's enough players I like on that team that I can overcome the Giants versus Eagles of it. Chiefs, just kind of bored with them. I'm not a Mahomes hater. I don't particularly care, and I think everybody who's out there like, oh, Patrick Mahomes, I hate him, rigging everything for Patrick Mahomes, blah, blah, blah. When he retires 10 years from now with 18 rings, everybody universally is going to be like, oh, goodbye to the GOAT. We loved him all the time. Never hated him, blah, blah, blah. People are just going to come right back to the fold when that happens, so let's spare me. Spare me the Patrick Mahomes hate. Who did we not talk about on this slate yet? I feel like we've kind of lost the thread a little bit, but again, it's going to change from where we're at now at 540. It just gets so thin so quick that, like, sure, we could talk about Mark Williams. 8,700 is not a terrible price for a 1.41 per minute guy. 5.14 short of the value threshold. We didn't get him. It doesn't really matter. On FanDuel, he's more relevant. He did hit the value mark on FanDuel for the 83, 5.5 value score, 21% of our center-only shares. So that's kind of a noteworthy one. Him, Jokic. You've got Nick Claxton taking up some center-only there. Between those three players, that's 53.9% of the center shares on FanDuel. Presumably, some of the Kelly-O, some of the Wemby are going to go through that. Probably not the Sabonis shares. Get another 10% there going to Messi. I could completely if it means taking more shares of Jokic somehow, obviously in a wildly different construction, I don't need these 9% of Messi. These are just getting there. 5.4, it's a good value, don't get me wrong. 5,100, that's a not bad price for a 0.94 per minute guy with 30 pretty solid minutes on the other side of that Denver-New Orleans game. But that is a sacrificial lamb as far as a lot of my shares here would go across 150 lineups. In a handful of lineups, I probably wouldn't expect to see, if I'm building 5 and I have one Messi share, that's more than this distribution calls for. If I'm building 10 and I have one, I would be like, do I really want that? So, Portis in, very good. Doug says, what are my thoughts on Edie, Murphy, Anthony, and Reed? They're staples in my lineups. DK, right, Doug? Pretty sure. So Nas, top of my head, was coming up more on DK and was looking fine. Ant was one of those, he wasn't coming up a ton, but what I said about him was, I assume you mean Ant, not Justin Edwards, right? Oh, you said Anthony. My mistake. I assume you mean Cole Anthony then. Do not play Carmelo Anthony on this slate. Speaking of guys who never got their ring. Yeah, Cole Anthony. FanDuel. Okay. Even better. Murph. So all these guys, I think, are going to fall into that bucket of any one of them could be perfectly fine here. They, at worst, are going to be in a are who they are kind of spot. I'm not sure we're actually going to get to much of any of these guys. We did go through a couple of them on the way down. And Edie. I think Edie will probably be our least exposed. Yep. Well, tie between him and Anthony. At 53, I just want a few more minutes, and then you would probably see him in at least a handful of shares. This is not a bad play, though. That value score is already 5.32. So the value's there. The production is there. The expectation is perfectly fine. He doesn't need to do a whole hell of a lot more to just make good value for you at 53. So it's just more the dynamics of the rest of the slate. But as a pivot point, I don't hate that. He played 28.5 in the last game, put up 43.5. We know for sure that he's a very good per minute performer. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that that's a mistake on FanDuel whatsoever. On DraftKings, it looks like is where we got Nas, which we talked about before. 5.37 value over there. We got him 20%, but still below the field. For the 7,000, I think it's more just, again, a product that he's just bouncing off a lot of those really good centers that we saw. You know, center's a pay-up spot on FanDuel in a lot of ways today. And then he's getting boxed out by just better power forward options. So I don't think there's a place for him. You can imagine, like, he would probably land a lot better if his eligibility was like small forward, power forward. Not that I'm calling for that, but I think he would have gotten into more of these lineups because 482, it's shy of our value mark, but not by much. And we know there's ceiling there. Not a bad option. Trey, I think the price has gotten up into territory where it's a little bit more difficult to justify. I don't mind having pieces from the other side of that New Orleans game, but we were just talking about Yves Missi. We got actually a little bit more Yves Missi on the FanDuel slate than we're getting for Trey. But good player, good producer, one of the more likely upside guys from the New Orleans side of that game, but not really mathing out correctly against a very large FanDuel slate. And then Zach Edey, I just don't have much love for. 4.28 value, 5,400, only at 21 minutes. He did play 25 in the last game and put up a monster score. You got to give him credit for that. If you see him, with 4 more minutes in how you're projecting it, then there's at least a little argument to be made. The per minute performance has been perfectly fine. But you would need those extra minutes. I would want to have like secure range, like 24 to 28 range, rather than like 21 to 24 kind of range. Power saying I can see Brandon Ingram to Toronto and Jimmy to Golden State. It sounds like Jimmy to Golden State's going to pick up momentum again. We'll see what comes of that. And then, right before the show, the Ingram, Toronto and the Hawks are apparently in on Ingram. So I definitely see him moving. I think it's going to be a fun deadline. I really do. Then again, I think that ahead of most deadline days, and they typically disappoint. We've already gotten blockbusters. So who knows what's really left in the makings. But there's a lot of good rumors out there, at least. Curious to see if my Knicks do anything. Mitch Robinson on the block, a lot of heat around some centers. A lot of teams could use one, but the Knicks are one of those teams. The Knicks could use Mitch's shot blocking ability. A little bit of rim protection. It's going to change the configuration of the team a little bit, though. Be interesting. He's a decent-sized contract, too, so if the Knicks are looking to do anything as far as like bringing anybody in, that's probably who's on the move. What I would hate to do is see them like try and jump in on a higher-priced player, use Mitch, and then throw one of the key current pieces into the mix. And it's not going to, like, Deuce McBride's contract is way too good. They're not going to include him, so it wouldn't be him. If it's campaign Landry Shamet on mid contracts, whatever, I don't care about that. But like the Harts of the world and so on, there's too much value, I think, in Hart. But if you're throwing together a deal for, like, KD, then you're talking about, all right, everybody loves this team, but we're going to completely change in the chasing the superstars configuration. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do. Doug says if Brandon Clark is out, or Power says, Doug, if Brandon Clark is out, I like Edey, but if Vince Williams, Smart, and maybe Conchar will mess that whole minutes projection up. That is exactly part of the problem right now, Power. Is this Memphis team just, for one, there were 4 or 5 guys that are currently questionable, and then for 2, this is how their minutes tend to go. It's just disgusting with low minutes. Everybody in like the upper teens to mid 20s outside of like Jaren Jackson and at times Ja. So it's just gross. Once we get some news, it'll iron out a little bit and you'll see some guys pop up a little bit. And yeah, if there's no Clark, then Edey comes up a little bit more. Anyway, coming up on a quarter till, or just after a quarter till, feels like time to punch out. I think we talked through all the relevant players, and again, this slate is going to completely change. Yeah, Power. Big Knicks fan. All the way back. Yeah, I love my Knicks. Long-suffering Knicks fan. Glad to hear you're on our side, bud. That's awesome. I didn't know you were a Knicks fan either. Good stuff. Hopefully we'll have a nice long playoff run to enjoy this year. I'm hoping my other team in the Garden has a nice long playoff run. Makes the playoffs at least. Now that they added JT, they ought to. But yeah, should be a good summer. Good spring summer for MSG teams and for the Knicks. Let's hope anyway. With that in mind, you guys, let me get out of here. Get on top of these updates. I got to reconfigure where we had been and then continue marching on with all the news that breaks. Catch up on any news we've already got. Projection updates will be on the site in the next 15 minutes or so, and then on top of things through lock, through all the late games, and so on and so forth. Check out rotoscouts.com for all your projections needs. I know I'm talking to the regular, so I won't pitch it too hard, but if you're not signed up, sign up. It helps. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, subscribe on YouTube. It helps. Hit the like button. Check out acemind.io. Good luck out there tonight, guys. Somebody go win something. Share a screenshot when you do, and we'll be back for more tomorrow on Thursday. Trade deadline Thursday. It's going to be chaos tomorrow. It's going to be fun. See ya.